Week 5 of the 2023 college football season is wrapped up, and so today I'll be giving you guys my Week 6 college football rankings, the 5th week of action. Another action-packed week, and we continue to see why this is such a competitive season. I mean, we still got a lot of undefeated teams across the nation, but the gap between 1 and 10 is especially close right now. So with that, let's get into it for Week 6, starting out with 1 through 7, and we've got a new number 1 this week. I didn't think this was going to happen, honestly, at least for a while, considering how straightforward Georgia's schedule is, especially until about November. But the way Michigan played against Nebraska and the way Texas has played so far this season, they should jump Georgia after this past week. Michigan beat Nebraska on the road 45-7. And so far this season for Michigan, they've beaten every team in dominant fashion. They've scored 30 or more points in every matchup, and they've allowed 7 or less points in every game as well. That's pretty impressive through 5 games. And of course for Michigan, really haven't played a strong schedule to this point. They've played 3 poor non-conference teams and then Rutgers and Nebraska so far to start out Big Ten play. But still for Michigan, the defense is incredible. They've got the best defense in the country right now. Offensively, that's kind of been the question mark so far, having scored only 30 points against very mediocre football teams. But we really started to see that Michigan offense shine against Nebraska. Scored 45, and as of right now, Michigan's a team that I think is very much deserving of being number 1 in the country. Texas right behind at number 2. I considered putting Texas at number 1 this week. Kansas is a good football team. That's usually not something you hear often, because Kansas usually is a terrible football team. But this season it's different. Jalen Daniels, of course, really didn't play against Texas, but Kansas is still a talented football team that was ranked for a reason heading into Week 5. They were 4-0 heading into the matchup, beat Illinois, and also beat BYU heading into the Texas matchup. So, and this ain't the first big win for Texas either. They, of course, beat Alabama in Week 2. So Texas at this point, being ranked number 2, very much deserving for them. Georgia number 3. I've said the past few weeks, until Georgia proves they shouldn't be number 1, they're going to remain that way. And I mean, against Auburn's a halfway decent football team, but they're no major SEC standout. And so for Georgia, they beat them 27-20. A win's a win, got it done, but that was a scary close game for a long time. And I mean, you consider as well for Georgia, they haven't looked super great the past few weeks. They allowed 21 points to UAB. They had a close game against South Carolina 24-14, which you consider Tennessee just destroyed South Carolina yesterday. I mean, that's something for Georgia you do have to keep an eye on. So, I mean, this hasn't been as dominant of a Georgia team as we've seen the past couple of years so far this season. And obviously this upcoming week, they've got their biggest test to date, taking on Kentucky, who's coming off of a huge win against Florida. So Georgia, as of right now, still one of the best teams in the country, very much capable of winning a national title. But as I mentioned before, the gap between 1 and 10, and especially you could say 1 through 5 or 6, is so close right now. Even one somewhat poor game is going to drop you a few positions, and it's not like recent years where we've seen 1 or 2 super dominant teams and everyone else kind of follows. It's a much different season. There are 10 teams in the country that could win a national title this season. Washington's number 4. This is a team that just had a close game against Arizona, 31-24. Arizona is not a bad football team, though. I mean, the Pac-12 is just stacked with teams. It's pretty insane. But for Washington, still offensively, they only put up 31 there, but the way that Washington has played so far this season, I still think they're a bit underrated, but I am dropping them down 1 position, mainly because their defense kind of showed last week that they can be a bit vulnerable. Obviously, they allowed 32 against Cal, but most of those points they allowed were in garbage time after they had put up 45 points in the first half. That's the point for Washington, is their offense. They've got the best offense in the country. I really do believe that. So for Washington, I've got them at number 4, and I feel like a team with the best offense in the country. Defensively, they still got a little bit of work to do if they want to be a national champion, but the way that offense is, they're very much worthy of being a top 4 team. Florida State's number 5, Ohio State's number 6. Both teams did not play this past week, but very much worthy of being top 6. Ohio State especially is a team to really keep an eye on. I mean, after their win against Ohio State before their bye, an incredible win there, and I mean, the last couple of games, they kind of had a slow start with their first two matchups, offensively especially, but the offense is starting to come alive, and I think Ohio State is really a team to keep an eye on. Florida State, obviously number 5, probably your ACC favorite. Penn State, number 7. Beat Northwestern 41-13, but this was a close game for a while. I mean, you wouldn't expect Northwestern to even be anything close to Penn State, but they were for a little while. But final score is what counts, and they beat Northwestern 41-13, jumping up into the top 7. Penn State, I've said it every week, this is a team that should not be underestimated. They are very much capable of beating out Michigan or Ohio State this season in the Big Ten East, which is pretty insane to say. But you got 3 Big Ten East teams in the top 6 of the AP poll, and for me, I've got 3 in the top 7. I mean, that's 3 teams in one division. 8 through 14, Oregon's number 8. This team beat Stanford 42-6. Another team that kind of had a slow start, but Oregon still got it done. And they have jumped USC. USC is a team that I've really liked so far this season, but the past couple of weeks, this team hasn't been terribly impressive. They beat Arizona State 42-28 a couple of weeks ago, but that was a close game for a long time against a bad ASU team. And then against Colorado, this team was very dominant at first. They won the game 48-41, but 41 points allowed. That's just something. I mean, I understand that this team, USC kind of had it sealed from the start, the way this team was so dominant at the beginning of the game, especially against just a poor Colorado defense. But to allow 41 points in the later stages of that game, that's just not something that's going to impress the committee too much. And for USC, still think this is a team that's very much capable of winning a national title this season, but defensively got to be better if they want any chance of getting to that point. But either way, USC and Oregon definitely both top 10 teams right now. And October is a big month for the Pac-12. In the upcoming weeks, we're definitely going to find out who's for real in the Pac-12. Alabama's number 10. This team is back in the top 10. They've really played well the last couple of weeks, beat Ole Miss by a couple of touchdowns last week, and then just beat Mississippi State 40-17. I said even after the Texas loss, you can't count out Alabama quite yet, and this team is starting to heat up as we look forward to October. They're 4-1 on the season. This is a team that's been dealing with a little bit of inexperience, especially offensively, but really looked good in week 5. Beat Mississippi State, put 40 up on them, so keep an eye on the Crimson Tide. And Notre Dame, number 11. They had a huge win against Duke. That was a huge matchup for the Irish. Beat Duke 21-14, Duke being a good football team. And obviously for Notre Dame, coming off of just a brutal loss to Ohio State, that's about as tough as it gets right there, being walked off by the Buckeyes at the goal line. But for Notre Dame, 5-1 on the season, very much still in contention as well, even though for Alabama and Notre Dame at this point, the pressure is definitely on both teams having one loss. And number 12 is Oklahoma. This team beat Iowa State 50-20. They've got a big game coming up here in week 6. They got Texas, obviously the biggest matchup of the Big Ten regular season, it appears, to this point. So, for Oklahoma, if they can take down Texas, which they're definitely capable of doing, that really puts OU into college football playoff contention. Huge opportunity for them. Ole Miss is number 13, beat LSU 55-49. One of the greatest games of the college football season so far. Really went back and forth, and Ole Miss came away with a massive win, 4-1 on the season, jumping up 6 positions into the top 15. North Carolina, number 14. This team did not play this past week, but I still very much see the Tar Heels as one of the best teams in the ACC, very much capable of giving Florida State a run. 15 through 21, Miami also did not play this past week, 4-0 on the season, and they're jumping up into the top 15 now. I think Miami is also a team really to keep an eye on. I've said this a few times, but the college football playoff picture is extremely deep this season, and honestly at this point goes all the way down to maybe 15 or so, and you've still got some undefeated teams outside of the top 15. So a lot of teams, and there's a lot of depth around the country this season. LSU has taken their second loss to Ole Miss 49-55. Obviously lost to Florida State in week 1. So this is a 3-2 football team now, but it's pretty rare at this point in the season to see a 2-loss team even in the top 20. But LSU still is in my eyes. I feel like this is still a really talented football team. That was a brutal loss against Ole Miss, and defensively really did not have any answers for the Ole Miss offense. So for LSU at this point, that pretty much knocks them out of college football playoff contention. unless they can just run the table and get to the SEC championship and beat Georgia. But LSU, number 16, still a good football team, but 2 losses. Definitely brutal for this team at this point. But Washington State, also a team to keep an eye on, 4-0, did not play this past week, but they have really come out of nowhere in the Pac-12. Very much a very good football team, especially offensively. Oregon State, number 18, beat Utah 21-7. Nice win for them. Obviously, Oregon State just lost to Washington State the week before, so do have them behind the Cougars, but Oregon State and Wash State, definitely 2 of your better teams in the Pac-12. Kentucky's number 19. This team just beat Florida 33-14. This is a team that's 5-0 suddenly, definitely looking like a one of the better teams in the SEC. So, and we're going to find out a lot about Kentucky in week 6. They got Georgia coming up, massive test for them, and a huge opportunity for Kentucky to launch themselves into college football playoff contention. But they're entering this week at number 19, definitely a team to keep an eye on. Tennessee just beat South Carolina 41-20. Probably the most impressive win for Tennessee to this point this season. Obviously 4-1, but Tennessee's still a team to keep an eye on, and Mizzou not far behind. So 3 SEC teams back to back here. Tennessee with the win over South Carolina, and Missouri just beat Vanderbilt 38-21, and they've got a huge game as well coming up here in week 6 against LSU. So, I mean, for Mizzou being a team that's already come out of nowhere this season, I mean, if they can take down an LSU team that's already taken a couple of losses this season, that really puts Missouri into the spotlight moving forward. But as of right now, Georgia is clear and obvious favorite in the SEC East. It's really going to be tough for any team to take them out. But at least you got Kentucky, Tennessee, Missouri, definitely background teams that can definitely cause some problems in the SEC moving forward. But 22-25, Maryland entering the rankings this week. This is a team that's taken on Ohio State in week 6. Massive opportunity for the Terps. And I talked about them this offseason as definitely a dark horse team in the Big Ten, and so far they have not disappointed. They were dominant in week 5. They're 5-0 on the season. Keep an eye on Maryland. Fresno State is number 23. This is a team that has emerged as probably my favorite for the group of 5 to make it to the New Year's 6 right now. Beat Nevada 27-9. This is a very good Fresno State team. So at this point, I mean, we haven't really seen them do anything too impressive. They got a few tests down the road, but Fresno State, definitely a team that I've got jumping up to 23 right now. And then you got Duke and Utah, 2 teams that didn't necessarily take terrible losses, but definitely dropping down big. Duke lost to Notre Dame 14-21, but it's so competitive. There's not much of a gap from like 1 to maybe 11 or 12, but there's hardly a gap from like 17 down all the way to 30 as well. Or I'd say about to 28. It's extremely competitive. Duke's a team that is now 4-1, took their first loss of the season. It wasn't necessarily a terrible loss. I mean, they were competitive with Notre Dame to the end, but obviously just a tough loss. And for Utah's just got to get their offense figured out. I said this, and I've kind of been conservative on them the past couple of weeks. I haven't really ranked them too high. And they just lost to Oregon State, only could put up 7 points in that matchup. And when you're in the Pac-12, which is the best offensive conference in the nation, I mean, it's going to be really tough to win football games when you're only scoring 7 points. So for Utah, obviously dealing with injuries, Cam Rising's been out. They need him back if they want any chance of being a contender this season. At this point, I mean, after a really tough loss like that, it's really tough to see Utah being a team that can be in the college football playoff, which is disappointing for a team that has shown so much potential the last couple of years. They've gotten close, just couldn't quite get there. But K-State is just outside the top 25. I've got them at 26. Still think K-State is a team not to underestimate. I actually had them ranked last week, but still so competitive to the point where even though they were just on a bye, I'm going to drop them out. Texas A&M's number 27. They've got Alabama this week, a huge game for them. We saw them beat Alabama in College Station a couple of years ago, so Aggies a huge game for them. Louisville at 28, still undefeated, even though they're probably one of the least impressive undefeated teams so far this season. A lot of close games. Tulane's 29, Kansas at 30, still like Kansas despite a tough loss to Texas this past week. But obviously for Kansas, they've got a chance for redemption coming up this upcoming week and moving forward as well. And Kansas and K-State dropped out this past week. But with that, that's going to wrap it up for today. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below on this top 25. Anything you do differently, let me know in the comments. And with that, stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. Catch you on the next one.